welcoming you to Mark. Oh, I messed up already. Hola, this is Dro, welcoming you to Mark Out Mania Live. Uh, uh, I'm Dro, aka Pedro Boyd, and with me is Josh. Hola, Josh.
Oh, sorry about the pause there, Pedro. I was burning a Belgium flag.
Yeah, were you preparing Belgian waffles or?
No, I probably won't be eating Belgian waffles. Although they're delicious, I won't be eating them for a while because they just leave a bad taste in my mouth currently.
Mm. Well, let's see. Apparently I messed up something with the Q&A. So apparently we don't have Q&A. I'll have to do that another time. But um let's see what are we talking about today? We are doing top 10 addendum because the last time we talked we were doing the top 10 favorites, our top 10 favorite pro wrestlers, and um for some reason we still do not know your your sound dropped out for like 30 minutes. So like your number 7 through number 4, no one got to hear. They just heard me like replying to you like like I was a crazy person talking to like voices in my head.
Well,
So
I think that'll be our bit for the future. Whenever me and you are together, is that my sound will just cut out and you will talk to yourself like a maniac, and people will kind of get what we're talking about, but not really.
yeah, they'll just kind of they'll add in their own thing that I'm responding to.
It'll have Pedro's voice, and then they'll mimic my voice and be like, "Yeah, we're talking about pro wrestling and cool." I'm
It'll
sure,
sound something like that. So, no, what?
I'm sure people got the gist of it last time, but I'll just go through I'll go through my 10 through 8 real quick, and then I will go through. Then we'll do the 7 through 4, and then we can go on to our next topic.
Okay, we'll go
So,
for it.
what was probably actually captured on sound there was my number 10 is Eddie Guerrero. Number 9 is Ravishing Rick Rude. Number 8 is the Funker Terry Funk. And number 7, who we got cut out with, was Toshiaki Kawada. He's a guy who's a favorite for both of us. He's my favorite Japanese wrestler of all time, and I enjoy just watching people get kicked in the face. So, I mean, that's when it comes to Kawada. That's all. That's really. I don't have much else to say about it other than he's. I can go more in depth in the fact that, like we talked about before, which you didn't hear, was that Kawada's the type of guy that he was never the top guy. Masawa was always looked at as the best and kind of the heir apparent to Jumbo. But I liked watching Kawada because he was awesome in the ring and he told a good story. He wasn't good with as far as like facial expressions and things like that, but he was pretty stoic. But he was a tough bastard, and he was fine with kicking people in the face, dropping people on their heads, and I enjoy watching him. I enjoy watching him wrestle. He's got all his teeth knocked out in the front through various means, whether all kinds of guys he's fought with. But Kawada's one of those guys that I just enjoy watching wrestle, and he got worn down. That All Japan style, as people know, is just rough, and Kabashi's nearly crippled, and Masawa, of course, unfortunately died. Which
Yeah.
there's that with it, but Taue kind of whatever. He's still around. Akiyama's beat up, but Kawada was my favorite of those of the big four for All Japan, and I always enjoyed watching him wrestle. I liked the where he was teaming with Masawa whenever they first came around against Jumbo, and I really liked Footloose with Kawada. But Kawada's just one of those guys that I can watch his matches and I love it. And I always rooted for him. I always hoped he'd win. He didn't beat Masawa a bunch of times, but whenever he did, it was always awesome.
Who was the other part of Footloose? Was it Onita, or am I getting that wrong?
I cannot recall off the top of my head. You're calling me out, and I was trying to think of it when we were talking, but Kawada overshadowed him. But I can't remember who it was that was with Kawada with Footloose, but they were a cool team.
Seemed like he teamed with Onita before, like back in the early days to some extent, but I could be wrong.
Yeah, I don't recall.
Let me tell you a Kawada story real quick.
Go ahead.
Oh, right. Let me tell you a quick Kawada story. One time I was watching that match. We discussed this on the last thing, but of course, I say discuss. People just heard. They just heard me talking about stuff. Uh, but I was watching that match where he broke his arm. It's the Gonzo Bomb match,
Yeah, the Gonzo match. Yeah.
the January '99 match. Yeah, I was watching it, and my dad was watching it for a little bit, and I was explaining that like Kawada had broken his arm and stuff, and my dad was telling me, uh, oh, he was saying like that's the kind of person that was trying to kill us in World War II.
Yeah, yeah. No, your dad is right. If you're talking about pro wrestlers that would totally fly a jet bomber into another person and kill themselves, Kawada would be definitely high on that list.
Yeah. So that was your number 7. What was your number 6?
Number 6 is the guy who. Now, but between me and Pedro's list, we had a lot of good wrestlers. You know, just guys that you thought of in the ring who were totally awesome. But my number 6 is probably the worst pro wrestler of any of our top 10, but is a guy that I just love for his charisma, all his actions in the ring. You know, everything you want to judge it by. It's the master and ruler of the world from wherever he damn well pleases. Psycho Sid Vicious.
Oh yeah.
I'm a big Sid guy, and you know he's not. And if you got to hear my number 1, which was Arn Anderson, and you know Arn and Sid stabbed each other with scissors. So it's funny that they're on my top 10 list, both of them. But I love both of those guys, and Sid had the best squashes of anybody in pro wrestling history. I think he would just beat the shit out of people and power bomb them. And he wasn't great, and he wasn't great on the mic, but Sid always had an aura about him. He got over wherever he was, and you know whether it was WWF, WCW, even in Memphis when he was Lord Humongous. He was one of those guys. I don't know if it was because of the look or whatever it was, but people loved Sid. And whenever I was a kid, he was larger than life, and I enjoyed watching him wrestle. And you know he's not great, but he's one of those guys that just he stuck with me, and I always liked him. And he just seems, you know, whenever you listen to him talk, he's not nearly as crazy as you think he is, and he seems like a pretty nice guy too.
Yeah, he's huge into softball, right? Isn't that like his one of his big deals?
Yeah, he's a big you know semi-pro softball player, which him and Jerry Lawler would have that in common because Jerry Lawler used to always pimp his upcoming softball games when he was in Memphis, and you know Sid was big into softball, and he would even miss dates to play the softball games. But Sid's one of those guys that he wasn't. I mean, I'm not going to argue that Sid was great, but we're talking about our favorites, and there's a difference between favorites and greats. Because I mean, if we were going my top 10 greatest wrestlers, my list is going to be totally different than what it is right now. But Sid's one of those guys. I liked him whenever he was in the Skyscrapers with Dan Spivey. When he teamed with Vader for a while, which was like a dream team for me, because those are two guys I just love. The Masters of the Powerbomb. They had a few matches together, and I just love Sid. He was crazy, and of course, I wanted him to end Hulkamania back in the day because I hated Hulk Hogan. Even as a kid, I was never big into Hulk Hogan. Now, you know, as an adult, I've grown to like Hulk Hogan more than, you know, that's a totally different subject, but we can talk about that some other time. But I've grown to actually like Hulk Hogan, but whenever I was a kid, I never liked him, and I wanted Sid to just kick his ass and powerbomb him through the ring and whatever else. You know, it's just one of those things. What did you think of Sid, Pedro?
Oh, well, I mean, Sid was cool. When we talked about this last time, I mean, I brought up that match with Shawn Michaels. That's still like my favorite Sid memory. The one where he beat him for the title in Madison Square Garden.
Yeah,
Um, and Sid is a guy who like got over everywhere he went. I mean, I know people saying people can say about his work rate or whatever that stuff, but that stuff doesn't really mean anything, especially as you get older. He had charisma. He had cool character, and like you said, the power bomb. He could just kill a jobber, and it'd be just be cool. So
and in the War Games match, which is one of the, it's infamous because there's no blood in it, but whenever he had the War Games match and he bounced Pillman's head off top of the cage and then dropped him down onto his head, that was awesome.
yeah.
And of course,
So
and Sid also has one of the
no
most
what?
Sid also has one of the most gruesome injuries that was on live TV whenever he broke his leg on Nitro.
Ay, 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 ay. You know who else had an injury like that? There was a wrestler in Mexico named like I can't remember his name. He was this super like bodybuilder muscular guy who like painted his whole body red and wore like a tiny red speedo and had like these little red boots and, and wore this like red devil mask. He was called like Gronda or something like that. And he one time tried to jump off the second turnbuckle to do a move, and he broke his leg the exact same way as Sid did. And like I saw it on like the Mexican TV, and they just kept showing replay after replay of it because Mexican TV loves to show like replays of that kind of stuff. And they're just like, look, and it was like
Yeah,
So we're lucky the Sid injury wasn't on Mexican TV.
yeah, that's the thing about Mexican wrestling is whenever you watch it, because not only do you have the 2 out of 3 falls format, but they love to show the replays, and they just keep going over and over and over again. And the Sid injury was whenever he wasn't that's my least favorite Sid, isn't that was like 96 or 97, whatever it was. He was wearing the jean shorts and a little knee brace because his knees were bad, and he just wasn't good at all. That's where he cut the famous promo about with Hall and Nash, where he was talking. He was trying to tell them they didn't have any brains in their head, and he actually said himself and that kind of shit. But Sid was Sid in 1990, 91, 92. That whole era was awesome, and I loved watching him. That was my big time. That was my big time growing up as a wrestling fan. From my 7 to 11, 12 range. Where that's where you're real big on pro wrestling, especially. And Sid was one of my main men.
Yeah, he was pretty cool. So that was your number 6. Who was your number 5?
Number 5 is a guy who a lot of people probably have on their favorites, or you can't deny his work rate and that kind of stuff. But it's Macho Man Randy Savage.
Dun 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 dun.
Savage was awesome. He's got the as far as us hardcore wrestling fans aren't going to look at it the same way. I mean, it's still a great match, but there's your casual wrestling observers from the '80s, whenever it was big. Most people are going to think that the Steamboat Savage match from WrestleMania is one of the best matches of all time, and it is a great match. But Savage, kind of took the world by storm then as a heel, just totally vicious. I never liked him as a face. I don't think he worked as a face because he was legitimately crazy, and especially with the whole Elizabeth stuff. He was a totally jealous dude. That Savage is the type of dude that would totally kick your ass if you tried to even talk to Miss Elizabeth, and he was just awesome all throughout the '80s, even into the '90s. He was good. And he had his retirement stuff that he did, and then he was an announcer on Raw whenever it first started. But even then he came back in WCW, and I always like Macho Man. We talked about before on the show, which we got cut out, was that both of us tried to do the Macho Man elbow and shit up. So I remember jumping off my dresser onto my wrestling buddy, which was a Macho Man one. It wasn't a Hulk Hogan or any of those guys. It was a Macho Man wrestling buddy. And doing the elbow drop off my dresser and breaking my bed, and my parents being really, really pissed off. And you jumped off a tree stump, didn't you?
Yes, I would jump off a tree stump onto the grass, like, and doing the Macho Man elbow. There's an embarrassing thing where one time this guy who worked with my dad, at whatever job my dad was doing at the time. He like lived on that street, and he came to talk to my dad, and he's like in the middle of the conversation, he started laughing. He said, "I get a kick every time I see that son of yours jumping off that tree stump onto the grass over."
And at that moment, you knew you were caught, and that your Macho Man love had your dad was going to look at you like, "What the hell are you doing?"
Well, there is a thing. My mom started after that. Started like she would watch the window, like the curtain would be drawn, but she would watch to see if my shadow would be the silhouette of me would be on that tree stump, and she would come out and be like mad at me.
So that
I had to stop.
so that just shows how awesome Macho Man was, because everybody knows from the last show that Pedro was a huge Ricky Steamboat mark, and Savage crushes windpipe and all that kind of stuff. He was on kayfabe terms, but he still wanted to do the Macho Man elbow and look as awesome as Randy Savage did.
Now, we don't have the Q&A enabled. I messed up on that, but Flooz is sending me some messages, and he said he told us Savage is #1/end period, and then he also said, "Wow, I never knew someone actually bought a wrestling buddy." So there's a call out to Flooz.
Yeah, well, Flues, I definitely had wrestling buddies. I had Macho Man's. I had Million Dollar Man, Ted DiBiase, because I was always a big heel guy whenever I was growing up. There was faces that I liked, but I just thought they were fucking stupid whenever I was watching wrestling, and they
Uh,
the way they capture things. And I never liked Hogan. Although I will admit, this is a thing. I will admit I was a huge Ultimate Warrior mark whenever I was a kid. And I look back on
so
it
was
now,
I.
but I mean, Warrior wasn't bad, but he wasn't. He definitely wasn't great. And the Warrior Savage match was awesome, although it killed the elbow drop that we're talking about, because Warrior took 6 or 7 of them and still won. But you know, we got the happy ending because Savage and Elizabeth got back together. So um, that was cool.
If you had asked me if we were doing a top 10 favorites like from when we were kids, like or from like the late 80s or say early 90s, the Ultimate Warrior would definitely have been on my list because my brother Larry and me were huge Warrior fans. But
It's funny that Flues would actually put Savage #1, because I figured his top 10 list would be nothing but Canadians.
he told me his top 10 list once. We should have brought him in on this, but well, let's keep this thing a moving. Oh wait, he has another comment. He said I was a pretty big Warrior mark, but much less than my friends, so I was known as the guy who wasn't big into Warrior. So, well, so that was your number.
I wonder if we were all during the WrestleMania 6 match, if we were all rooting for Warrior over Hogan.
I was.
I
I totally was. Yes.
That was a big, turning point in my childhood as far as wrestling. I was, growing up, Pedro and I have talked about this a lot in the past. I was a big NWA, WCW guy, but I would watch the WWF stuff, especially the big pay-per-views. I would rent them on cassette, on VHS, which, was the thing back then. And I guarantee I watched that WrestleMania 6 videotape at least I'm guaranteed at least 25 times. And I love the Hogan Warrior match. I still think it's a good match. It's definitely contrived, and you can tell it's all planned out, but it was still awesome. I love seeing Warrior beat Hogan. That was the passing of the torch, and Hogan came back and ripped the torch away from Warrior. But
Well, this is totally off topic. I know we've gone on a tangent here, but that match, the WrestleMania 6, we didn't have pay-per-view at the time. When a pay-per-view would come on, there would be the scrambled channel. Did you ever get like scrambled channels for pay-per-views?
yeah, I used to watch. The two big things that I would watch scrambled are wrestling and adult movies.
Oh my goodness. Well, Larry and me, we had to go do a church function, and while WrestleMania was going on, so WrestleMania 6, so we recorded the scrambled channel, and like when we came home, we're like watching the videotape, I mean, I say watching. We're more listening. You know, we're listening to the match, and when the Warrior wins, I remember we just got these goosebumps, and we were like, "Oh my god! Oh my god!" I'm getting goosebumps now just remembering that moment for some reason. Like when the Warrior wins, my brother Larry and me just like getting goosebumps at the same time and just freaking out, like, "Oh my god, he won! He won!" But yeah, I just thought I would throw that in.
Well, it was one of those things where Hogan was on top for so long, and then the Warrior had picked up steam and picked up steam and picked up steam, and I'm with you on, and that's the thing that kids nowadays are. Well, not sound like an old man, but you have access to everything on the internet now, but. We should literally sit there and watch for 3 hours to scramble because our families couldn't afford to order pay-per-views for $60. You couldn't convince your parents to do it, and I mean I did the same thing. I remember my parents had an old school box television, the ones that were actually in the wooden frame. It was a Zenith. It
Oh
was like,
yeah, yeah, yeah.
I mean, at the time, it was like 25 years old. It was in our garage, and I would go out there and I would turn the Zenith on. And I would go to the pay-per-view channel, and I would listen to the pay-per-views because we didn't get to order them very often. And if my parents were feeling generous that month, they may order something for me. They used to order the NWA stuff for me, but a lot of the WWF stuff is more expensive, and they wouldn't order it all the time. And I would listen to it, and I would mark out just like you. I mean, that's the thing, that commentary back then was big. It's big now, but they're not as big about storytelling and that kind of stuff. But that was a big thing back then. You would listen to it, and you could still kind of get what was going on. You could kind of make out what was going on at times. Most of the time, it was just scramble overall, but sometimes you could see body shapes and that kind of stuff. You would know what was going on, but it was so cool.
The oh, you could do a whole. We could do a whole show on commentary because commentary is so bad right now. Um, the only thing I'll say there is you do not, if a match is going on and you're just talking about the Twitter or the some hashtag or something else going on about social media, and then someone does a move and you're like, oh my god, this thing just happened, what's going to happen when we come back to commercial break? It does not make that thing that just happened seem like a big deal because you didn't talk about anything that happened before that this thing just happened. I mean, commentary is just like a waste of time at the moment. But
Well, I think on that note, it's not because of the guys themselves. I think it's just because of the overall the way WWE and those kind of guys present everything. It's all about social media and that kind of stuff, and they're telling those guys what to talk about and what to say. So I'm not going to put all the blame on Michael Cole and those kind of guys. I don't think Cole's a horrible announcer. He's definitely not great, but I know a lot of it is just that he's doing whatever they tell him to do.
oh yeah, I mean, I totally know it's just them doing what they're told. One last note here is one last note from Flues before we move on, because we're taking too long on this Ultimate Warrior thing. He had sent me a text, or not text, whatever this Google thing is. The Papa Shango cursing jacket wearing warrior was the moment I knew for 100% sure that wrestling was fixed. So there you go.
So,
Um,
so Flu's totally no sold the Ultimate Warrior spitting up Black Bile.
yeah. So that was Savage was your number 5. Who was numero cuatro?
Number 4 is Stone Cold Steve Austin, Stunning Steve Austin, any of the incarnations of Steve Austin. Um, I like I said, I'm a big NWA guy. That's what I grew up on, and I loved him as Stunning Steve. And then he got let go, and I heard stuff on the, back in the day. It was probably, I mean, I got on the internet in probably 94, 95, somewhere around there, and you'd hear about him and ECW cutting these promos, and then of course I saw it later on where he was doing all this stuff while he had his while he was out with injury, and then he came into WWF and he was the ringmaster, and I hated that gimmick. I thought it was terrible. I love Stone Cold or Steve Austin. I love Teddy DiBiase, but those two together were not good. And then he cut the infamous promo in '96 with Stone Cold, the whole Stone Cold bit, and he just took off from there. And over time, he deteriorated in the ring. After his neck injury with Owen Hart and that kind of stuff, he wasn't the best wrestler, but he was always entertaining. And one of the guys that I really loved.
Yeah, Steve Austin is great. I mean, the everything you said, he's even even after the neck injury, he changed the way that he wrestled. He went from all the stuff he used to do to like, well, okay, now I'm just going to be a brawler, and he basically became the best at that he could be, and he still applied all his ring psychology and storytelling and stuff, and
Yeah, he was great. He was good as the whole brawler type, and of course he had the infamous feud with McMahon. But he had a lot of good matches with all kinds of different dudes. And I mean, whether it was Shawn Michaels, Bret Hart, he had the matches with The Rock that were good, and even like slept on match that is one of my favorite matches of the early 2000s. It was Stone Cold versus William Regal in a strap match. It was on SmackDown, and those guys just beat the shit out of each other for 12 minutes. It's awesome. So if anybody's listening to this and you want to see something that's really cool, just you can search on Daily Motion or YouTube. You should be able to find it. Just search for Steve Austin versus William Regal strap match, and it's awesome.
oh wow, I don't remember that match. So I mean, I want to go watch it now, but not now. You know what I mean? But
Yeah, I mean it's cool. Regal is one of those guys that he's on my cusp of if we did this a year from now, he may be on my list. He definitely was at the edge of my honorable mentions, and Regal was one of those guys that I just love watching wrestle, and those two together that match is awesome.
so he was your number 4. We got your number 3, 2, and 1 on the other show, right? Because the sound came back when we were talking about my number 4, I think.
Yeah, and I'll just say them real quick. We won't talk about them, but I'll just say who my 3 through 1 is. 3 is Stan Hansen, 2 is Vader, and number 1 is Arn Anderson.
Yeah. So all very good stuff. You have an excellent top 10.
We varied, but we both like everyone in each other's top 10. I enjoy everybody that was in your top 10. You probably like nearly everybody that was in my top 10, so it's good to go.
So we've done the top 10 addendum. So what topic do you want to talk about next?
Well, we were talking about that we're kind of going to go over who we think we could go. I was thinking about it. We could go either way, but you brought up the point of the best punches in pro wrestling. We could also, if you want to just kind of put it on a sliding scale, we could go best brawlers. But let's go with best punchers first, and then we'll kind of go into the brawling angle. So we'll throw guys out there, and then we'll go back and forth on what we think about those guys. And I'll let you start, Pedro.
Oh well, I mean, at the start, I mean, it has to be Jerry Lawler and Terry Funk, in my opinion. Those two guys.
I agree with you that I think Lawler is the best puncher in pro wrestling history. There's no doubt about it. And Lawler's really one of those guys that he's climbing up my list. I'm trying to find more footage of him, watching the Memphis stuff and doing that kind of thing. But Lawler is one of the. He's looked like. I mean, a lot of people will kind of. There's people that maybe don't watch or too deep into pro wrestling, but Jerry Lawler is legitimately one of the 5 greatest pro wrestlers of all time, and he's just one of those guys that is believable. He can work face or heel, but we're not talking about that. We're talking about brawling, and Lawler can throw all kinds of different punches. He throws jabs, he throws crosses, uppercuts, left and right, and he makes it look believable. And he legitimately broke people's jaws, and of course his whole feud with Andy Kaufman and that kind of stuff. And you're talking about Lawler and Funk together. I mean, those guys had some epic matches in Memphis. Their empty arena match is pretty much the epitome of if you want to just watch guys punch each other in the face in a pro wrestling environment. There are no wrestling moves in that match. It's all just punching each other and kicking each other and throwing each other around, and it's awesome.
Well, one of the things I like with the Lawler is sometimes he seems to do this a lot in matches. Opponent will be down and he'll get on them and he'll do all these like really fast kind of punches, like while he's like on his knees and he'll be like boom 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 boom. Do you know what I'm talking about?
He's doing the rabbit punches, and he's just going straight to their forehead with it. I mean, and if you're going to talk about Lawler, not to get off topic with the Lawler and Funk, because we'll talk about Terry Funk. But if you're going to the Yin to Lawler's Yang, you got to go Bill Dundee, because Bill
Oh
Dundee,
yeah,
Lawler and Dundee had been feuding for literally 40 years, and they just punch each other in the face, and it's always awesome.
yeah. I mean, I mean, those two still do stuff every blue moon. They'll pull out their feud like, hey, let's get more money out of this. And,
Yeah, they had a match in 2011, which is Lawler and Brian Christopher versus Bill Dundee and Jamie Dundee, and that match is awesome.
oh wow, that does sound awesome. Father and son versus father and son.
That's good stuff, man.
So, what about Terry Funk?
Terry Funk is the guy that you would, I mean, and and I'll talk about other guys later, but Funk has that whole style of he does the wild punches. He's almost looks like he's a little drunk. He's a little he's a little out there and doing the wild punches, and he's just like he'll get you right in the face with different stuff. He does the straight punches fine, but I like his wild brawling the most.
Yeah, yeah. I don't know why I like his punches so much. I just I think he's really good at those.
You like his punches because he's awesome.
Yeah, yeah, that's true. Terry Funk is awesome.
I'm gonna throw. Let's see. I will go with a guy that I really liked. I think a guy that me and you both like a lot is Sergeant Slaughter.
Oh yeah, yeah.
Slaughter, especially in the early '80s, when he was feuding with Sheik, and then he did the stuff in AWA. He always threw good punches. He would get right in the face, and he didn't really have much of a mix up as far as different type of punches like Lawler did, but Slaughter could just. I mean, as far as just straight up punches to your face, I mean, there aren't many guys that are better than him.
Oh yeah, Sergeant Slaughter, yeah, it's real good. And if you go back even further, like when he was a heel and he had all these matches with Bob Backlund, he has lots of great stuff back then too.
Yeah, Slaughter is one of those guys that just as an overall wrestler is underrated because people look at him. A lot of the newer fans will look at him just as a authority figure and kind of a stooge and that kind of stuff. But if you look at late '70s, early '80s, Sergeant Slaughter, whether he was, of course, he was Sergeant Slaughter, but he was also, what was it, Mask Destroyer Mark II, or it was something like that.
Oh yeah.
And then he was Pretty Boy Bob Remus in Georgia, and he would feud with all different kind of guys. He would come in and out because he was kind of big on. The thing about Slaughter is he wanted to get paid what he deserved to get paid because Slaughter was more over than almost anybody. Even in the early WWE days, in the early '80s, where he was feuding with Sheik, and then after that they brought Hogan in, and Slaughter was arguably as good of a draw as Hogan was, or if not more. And he left WWF because they weren't paying him the money that he thought he should make. He went to AWA. He did the stuff with Jerry Blackwell. They feuded against Adnan Al-Qasi, which is Skandar Akbar, and all those guys. And they drew a bunch of money, and he was awesome the whole way through.
Another thing with Slaughter, this has nothing to do with punching, but he was, for a guy his size, he was a great bumper.
Yeah, he had the bump he would do in almost every match, which was throw him into the turnbuckle, and he would fly over the top turnbuckle and go to the floor. Did that huge thing, and he's always awesome. And Pedro, because you were part of the DVD VR first WWF set where the Slaughter Sheik match was the #1 match on the set, and you got to see that whole thing where a lot of people don't even remember that match, and that match is awesome. The boot camp stuff.
Yeah, oh, I love that match. I mean, I never seen that match before, taking part in that, and it was just unreal. I mean, because they're just punching and kicking each other basically, and working a gimmicked shoe. Which, I mean, if you go with real life logic, the logic that a shoe that you just like tap against like the floor is going to somehow like load up some weapon and make the shoe dangerous, like, makes no sense. But it's like in pro wrestling logic, the Sheik taps his shoe, it's like, oh my god, he's loading up the shoe, and then when he kicks him, it's like, oh, well, there's the whole deal where towards the end, the Sheik takes that shoe and he's hitting it on the ring post like repeatedly to like super load it up, and everyone's going nuts. I remember I'm going nuts, and like of course, real logic, you're like, this makes no sense. It makes no sense that this shoe is getting super loaded up, but in pro wrestling logic, you're all caught up like, oh my god, it's super loaded, and but like. Slaughter ducks and he gets the shoe and blasts Sheik with it. It's just unreal. I mean, when you think about it, it's just blood, punching, kicking, and very few moves, and it's just like so immense. There are people doing a gazillion moves and can't touch like the drama and emotion this match like can bring out.
Well, that's the thing. If you're listening to this and you haven't watched that Slaughter and Sheik boot camp match, you need to watch that. And we were talking about earlier, touching on if you go Lawler Funk versus in the empty arena match, those matches, both of those matches are nothing but punches and kicks. They're hard. I mean, I know in the Slaughter match, the Lawler Funk match is nothing but punches and kicks. It's pretty much nothing but that. But the Slaughter and Sheik match, there's a couple of headlocks and that kind of stuff, just kind of semi wrestling moves. But the thing is, you can have a great match, and just through storytelling and just beating the shit out of each other. I mean, that's the thing. That, we want realism in wrestling. You've got the thing, but that Slaughter and Sheik match is awesome. Like you're talking about with the drama of the boot, and just those guys just hate each other because you got U.S. versus Iran, and then the Lawler Funk match is just two guys that hate each other. Funk was totally carrying on about Lawler, and Lawler was carrying on about Funk, and then they want to. These guys want to fight here so bad that it doesn't matter if there's anybody in the audience. They just want to beat the shit out of each other, and it's awesome.
One more thing about Slaughter. I know I'm always on these tangents. I apologize. The When he did the turncoat angle when he came back to the WWF, and he was now the Rocky like supporter. He was like a traitor. Yeah. And it led to his one WWF title reign, and it led to the match with Hulk Hogan at WrestleMania. His matches with the Warrior, including the one where he won the title, and they had a few other matches. Those matches are pretty good. They're not like bad matches at all. And then his match with Hogan at WrestleMania is a lot better than it sounds on paper. I mean, if you go Sergeant Slaughter versus Hulk Hogan, like that doesn't sound, maybe that doesn't set the world on fire on paper, but Slaughter at least he really put a lot into that match, I thought.
Yeah, Slaughter, as far as just big dudes, I mean, I wouldn't classify him as a total fat guy or obese wrestler, but as a big guy, Slaughter is one of the. I think he's definitely. I probably put him in the top 5 of guys that just because he could bump like you were talking about earlier. He could bring the hate and just punch people in the face, and simplicity can go a long way in pro wrestling. And Slaughter is one of those guys that. And I'm going to talk about a guy later that Slaughter was a part of that I think is just awesome with punches. But Slaughter is one of those dudes that I think he can put a good match on anybody. Even in the early WWF, early 80s, he had a good match against Backlund. And, of course, he had the good stuff against Sheik. He had the AWA stuff. He had the Georgia stuff. And even like you're talking about, I think his reign whenever he was with Iran, the whole gimmick was kind of lame, but his matches were pretty good. I mean, he had pretty good matches.
Yeah. For punchers, let's see. I was going to throw out Rugged Ronnie Garvin, but is he a good one to throw out there? Or?
Yeah, I mean, Ronnie Garvin is awesome. The thing I was shocked by whenever I was like lately, I've been reading stuff, and I was reading about Ronnie Garvin. The dude started in the '60s. And you wouldn't think that whenever you're watching, because like me and you, probably the most we've seen of Ronnie Garvin is in the 80s, and you wouldn't think that he was that old. But like at that time, whenever he was feuding Valentine, and whenever he was in NWA, he was the NWA World Champion. Because Ronnie Garvin was the NWA World Champion. If people don't know that, he was he was in his 40s doing that, and he was awesome. Ronnie Garvin didn't have the charisma or anything like that. He wasn't a character. He wasn't the type of guy that you're going to, just knock your socks off talking, because he was pretty boring overall as far as talking wise. But in the ring, like, I love that style. I mean, we talked about, Arn Anderson's my favorite wrestler of all time. So anybody that just kind of works over a certain thing, I like that. And Garvin would just punch the shit out of people, and he would do the Garvin stomp, where he would just stomp the shit out of people on the chest, neck, face, whatever it was. And Garvin had good punches, and his match against standout match that I remember from a kid. You could go look back, and I could find more things that I like about him, but that match he had with Greg Valentine, I don't know if it was Survivor Series or one of those, but it went 20 minutes. It was a draw. And those are two of my favorite guys from the 80s, Garvin and Valentine.
Oh yeah, him and Valentine had a number of good matches. I even like the two matches that set up their big angle, even though they're like really short matches. They're like these short, like 5 minute, like stiff fests. Like they just stiff the crap out of each other with chops and stuff. And yeah, all his matches with Valentine are good. I like the. I've only seen of his NWA title reign. I only seen the match where he lost the title back to Flair in the steel cage. I thought that was a pretty good match. And there's a match I saw much later on. I saw it off ESPN Classics from the AWA stuff. I saw a match where he wrestled Greg Gagne for the AWA TV title, and that was actually a pretty good match as well.
Yeah, Greg Gagne is one of those guys that people shit on, but he wasn't bad. I've watched that old AWA stuff that I've ordered, and he was pretty good. He wasn't that believable as a wrestler, but Gagne was pretty good. I mean, he was the promoter's son, so people shit on him, but I think he was all right.
And there's since I know well Flues was listening, well maybe he's still listening. It says we have one viewer, but Flues showed me an angle once from Canada where like the Garvins, which was Ronnie Garvin and Jim Garvin, like attacked the Rougeaus, and that was such a like that angle just blew me away. I need to ask him about that one of these days to show you. But so yeah, who else you got for punches?
Yeah, I've never seen that angle, but I imagine it's got to be from Montreal, right?
I think so.
'Cause I know Ronnie was always built from Montreal, so it's got to be that. You know what? And if you're talking about Jimmy Garvin, even though he was the shittiest Freebird of all time, he was. I think he had pretty good punches. I was watching the other day. I was watching on WB Network. I was watching Starrcade '91, I think it was, where they had the Battle Bowl and they had random tag teams, and like the Jimmy Garvin had pretty good punches, and of course he had that match with Flair in the cage for the world title back in the day. I don't know what show that was on, but Garvin wasn't a great wrestler, but he was one of those guys that he was all right. He was serviceable, and he had a good punch, and I like that. He was terrible in the AWA, which I've been watching the AWA stuff lately. He was with Steve Regal, the shitty Steve Regal, and they were tag team champions. And they beat the Road Warriors in a really crappy fashion, and he wasn't good at all. But I'm gonna talk about another AWA guy, and I know you like this guy, Pedro. I don't know if you agree with me as far as punching wise, but the guy we talked about earlier, I think Crusher Blackwell.
Oh yeah, yeah. I like him a lot. All the matches I've seen of his, I mean, I know when you see him, he's just this fat dude wearing, this black outfit, and his hair is kind of like unkempt, and he's just got a big beard, and he doesn't have a very good appearance, really. Like, his presentation leaves a lot to be desired, but like the matches I've seen with him have all been good, and he does the blood feud battle things really good, and he has all kind of good offense, and he has he has one of the best big man like drop kicks.
Oh yeah, he could move in the ring because I mean he was legitimately probably 400 pounds, and he would move all around the ring, and his punches were awesome, and I like just seeing him just punch a guy in the face and get punched in the face. He could sell well. I like him better as a face than I did as a heel because I think he was as strong as a heel, but he's one of those random fat guys that could do everything in the ring, and I really enjoyed what I've seen of him because I never knew about him before because I didn't watch AWA stuff. He was in Georgia in I think the late '70s, early '80s, but I didn't get that stuff. But watching the AWA set, Blackwell's one of those guys that just stands out above everybody else.
Oh yeah. Oh, and Fluz commenting about the Rougeaus thing with the Garvins. He said, "Yeah, they Pearl Harbored the Rougeaus and murderized the retired patriarch Johnny Rougeau, who had spent his career booking himself as virtually invincible. Johnny Rougeau getting his ass whooped had never been seen, basically. So that was like part of the reason why that angle was so hot. But yeah, just backtracking." Time Lord thing. I can't do the Doctor Who thing, but yeah. So yeah, Crusher Blackwell. He was a good puncher, and he was good at everything. And like I
Yeah,
said, I like his blood. I like his big man blood wars and stuff.
yeah. 'Cause whenever he would bleed, you thought the bacon grease was coming out of his forehead because he was so fat. But he was still awesome.
Oh my goodness. Who's another good puncher? We got any more?
Yeah, I've got one that I really like. This is a dream thing for me, is that a guy that I really liked as a puncher was Roddy Piper, and
Oh yeah.
I liked whenever because he would do the wild man punching, where he would just kind of just flail all over the place and do that kind of stuff. I think a dream match, as far as just punching wise, is if you got about 9 beers into each guy, and then you just put them loose in the ring. If you had Roddy Piper versus Terry Funk, it would be the greatest wild man brawl of all time.
Oh yeah. Has Roddy Piper and Terry Funk ever fought each other? They must have at some point.
Yeah, I'm sure they have at some point, 'cause they had to have crossed paths at some point, but not that I haven't seen any matches between them. But I just imagine, because Piper would do those overhand punches, and he would just kind of wildly flail his arms, and I thought it was awesome. And Funk would do that too whenever he get into the drunken stands, and it was kind of like he was the drunken master, the whole Chinese thing and Japanese
Yeah.
stuff, where he would just get into the drunken fighter stance and he would just totally just wail on people. And I would love to see those guys just go back and forth after about 9 beers.
Yeah. I mean, I want to see that now. I want to see Funk and Piper in like a wild brawl, like in their heyday, like just going nuts.
Do you have any guys you want to throw out there, Pedro?
I'm blanking a lot. So if you got names, definitely put it out there.
Well, we talked about it before.
But,
Do we want to? Do we
I
want
was
to?
gonna say.
Go ahead.
Oh, I was gonna say real fast. Flus said Piper had a great eye poke too, but I mean, lots of people had a great eye poke. So yeah, he
Yeah,
did have a great eye poke. So what?
yeah. Piper was good at the whole chicken shit thing whenever he was in, especially in WWF, where he would do the low blows and the eye poke and that kind of stuff.
So what were you bringing up?
I was going to say, do you want to talk about? We were talking about the other day when we were talking about this topic. Do you want to go into guys that we think suck at brawling that people like? AKA Josh goes off on Bruiser Brody.
Oh my goodness! As long as the language doesn't go supernova, I guess so.
Well, Pedro brought up this topic of the whole best brawlers and best punchers of all time, and a guy that gets a lot of love from the old school community and people just revere him and whatever else you want to talk about is Bruiser Brody. And I'm a guy that Pedro and I are both from Texas, so Pedro and I both grew up on Texas wrestling, Southern stuff, and WWF, whatever it may be, and we've both seen Bruiser Brody a lot. I think Abdullah, if you're talking about guys that feuded with in that whole time period, Abdullah was okay with punches. He wasn't as bad as Bruiser Brody in my opinion, but I think Bruiser Brody is one of the most overrated guys of all time. And on the internet, Dave Meltzer is a big guy on Bruiser Brody, and he named the best brawler award after him and that kind of stuff. And I think Bruiser Brody is one of the biggest offenders of making pro wrestling look completely terrible and fake. And you add to the fact that he's a total prick, and he wouldn't put anyone over. There's obviously everybody knows about the story about Bruiser Brody, where he got stabbed and killed by Invader in Invader 3 in Puerto Rico because he wouldn't do the job, and he's one of those dudes that. And that's the thing, like if you look at my list, Stan Hansen, those two type of dudes from West Texas, they were in that whole Brody camp, and they would still do business the right way. But if you look at any of the matches from the '80s, Brody wouldn't job to anyone. He wouldn't make anyone look good. He would kick out at 2.5. Even if the only clean job the guy ever took in the '80s was against the Great Kabuki in WCCW, and he kicked out right after the 3 count. So he's just one of those dudes that he makes everything look fake. And if you go back and all you gotta do is look at a YouTube, just go do a YouTube search for Bruiser Brody, watch one of his matches, and tell me it doesn't look like the most complete horseshit you've ever seen in your
life. Well, all I'll say about Bruiser Brody is there is a match I saw. I have it on tape somewhere. It's from a long time ago. It's between him and Jumbo Serrata over one of the titles that would eventually get merged into the Triple Crown. It wasn't the Triple Crown yet, so this is before pre-Triple Crown. But that match is like super good. But I know he's wrestling Jumbo Serrata, who's like one of the best workers of all time. So.
Now I know Pedro that Bruiser Brody's wife just slipped you a tenner and it said to stop the hate on him because Josh is just going through it. I know the Jumbo match you're talking about, and whenever he was in Japan, he would sell for Giant Baba and he would sell for Jumbo Saruta, but I'm talking about strictly in the U.S. where he'd go around and he wouldn't cooperate with anybody. And of course, the most infamous thing that he did was against Lex Luger in the steel cage, where he just stopped selling completely, and it's totally unprofessional on one level. But then, if you watch all you gotta do is go look at him delivering chair shots and that kind of stuff. He would just tap the guys over the back, and it was just he's one of those guys that everybody says he's awesome as a hardcore wrestler and everything like that, but I think he's just terrible.
And he's responsible for John Nord doing the Barbarian thing for a long time. The or whatever John Nord's bark thing was. He was copying Bruiser Brody. Do you know what I'm talking about?
Yeah, but I actually like John Nord now, and whenever I watch his stuff, it was fine. He would do all the DQ stuff. He'd throw people over top rope or whatever it was to get countouts, and I was fine with that. But Brody was just, I can't get into Brody
at all. Who else is like a bad brawler?
Oh, I'm trying to think who was. It was a good. I'll give Flu some love on this. You're talking about punchers. I think Bret Hart had pretty good punches.
Oh right.
Yeah,
I like his kicks a lot. Like when he would kick people in the face, it always looked like he kicked them full on, but he really didn't. And I liked his kicks a lot. But yeah, his punches were pretty good too.
And of course, Bret was kind of above the whole brawling hardcore style, but I thought he could have been a pretty good hardcore wrestler because when, like you say, his punches, his kicks, they all look pretty legitimate, and I think he could have been pretty good. Owen, if you're talking about Hearts, I think Bret was better as far as strikes go. Trying to think of guys who were good brawlers from that era. The Dudleys were pretty good in the ECW era. I like Devon more than Boa as far as just strikes wise. Trying to think who else from that era is pretty decent at brawling. Looking at my list too, Austin was a good brawler, but his punches didn't look as legitimate as they probably could have been.
Well, Mick Foley was a great brawler. I can't really remember his punches off the top of my head, to be honest, but
Well, all you got to remember with Mick Foley is every time he would punch, he would go, but
Well,
he was better. He was better overall at storytelling than he was at. I don't think he was that great as far as striking and just a sense of believability. But there's not many guys that are better at putting a match together at a hardcore level than Foley is.
Flues commented, "The Rock is entertaining, but looked bad in a brawl." I saw that one list you sent me that they had The Rock listed for top 10 punches or whatever, but I never thought that much of The Rock and his punches.
No, it all looks fake because he does the whole. It's all open fist, and then he does the spit and he slaps him across the face. It's not legitimate. You know, a guy. I just thought about a guy that I thought was awesome at punching was Bobby Eaton.
Oh, I didn't think about him.
Yeah, if you go back and watch whether it's the Midnight Express or and that's a whole other topic, but I'll just go on a rant here about because I love tag team wrestling. Bobby Eaton, everybody talks about Ricky Morton and those kind of guys, but Bobby Eaton is one of the best tag team wrestlers of all time. He was, I think he was better than Condrey. I think he was better than Stan Lane, Randy Rose, anybody. The Midnight Express, I think was good because of Bobby Eaton. I mean, the other guys provided different things, but Eaton was good with punches. He was good on offense, good on defense, and of course, I loved him whenever he tagged with Arn in the Dangerous Alliance. But Eaton was one of those guys that he could throw a good punch, Southern style, and he would just waylay guys in the face. Tracy Smothers is another guy that was a good puncher. There's a lot of those guys from the South that are good. And I'm not just saying that because I'm obviously from the South, but I think a lot of the guys from the South were some of the best punchers of all time.
Oh yeah, it's because we're all rough and tumble cowboy folk down here. We
That's
gotta
right.
fight and protect our woman all the time. Yeehaw! Had to work in the yeehaw from the pirate radio stuff.
Do you have any lucha guys? Do you have any lucha guys that you say would be some of the best punchers of all time?
Do I have a list? Or
What?
no, I didn't come up with. I didn't. I didn't come up with a list or anything.
I was
I was
about
just going off.
lucha.
Oh, lucha guys? Huh. I really don't know. Because I mean, like when you get to the opuestas matches, like when you get to the hair matches and the mask matches. I mean, people get, yeah, it's like blood, feuds, and you get these bloody matches. Man,
What, what,
I'll have to think about that.
what about Satanico?
Oh, yeah, Satanico's pretty, yeah,
Uh,
and yeah, I mean, he's had a ton of those.
as
Yeah,
As far as Mexican guys that I've seen, it's all about. I've kind of gone on recommendations from different stuff, but Satanico, El Dandy, and there's a dude from the '80s who is. I only watched one match, and it was incredible. It's probably the best lucha match I've ever seen in my life. But if I just going by that match as far as punching somebody in the face, Sangre Chicana. Have you ever heard of him?
oh, fuck yeah. Oh, yeah, fuck yeah, was what I was gonna say. Um, there is a hair match between him and a guy who called himself MS1 that is
No,
just like out of the.
yeah, that's the match I'm talking about. That's the best lucha match I've ever seen in my life that I've watched through, and that match is just fucking incredible. If anybody's listening to this, look up Sangre Chicana versus MS1, hair versus hair, and if you don't watch that and just get a total wrestling boner, I don't know what to tell you.
That's a really good one. Yeah. Oh man, I forgot all about that. Yeah, the Sangre Chicana, he worked for a while under the gimmick of Rambo. Did you know that? For a while he did a Rambo gimmick.
Well, I did not know that, but he's no Greg Gagne whenever he did the whole Rambo gimmick.
Yeah, that is a good one. Well, Flu's commented on most luchadors I've seen tend to look visibly soft to look like top brawlers punchers. Well, yeah, on the regular lucha matches, yeah, they don't. None of them really, work stiff. You don't really see a lot of stiff lucha. Sometimes they'll lay in the chops, but otherwise, there's not a lot of stiff until you get to like I said, the apuestas matches and stuff. When the hair is on the line or the mask is on the line, then people get bloodied and all kind of stuff.
Flues, what you need to look at is that the title matches are going to be technical matches, but if you go mask versus mask or hair versus hair, it's going to be totally just kicking each other in the dick. And you need to watch. I'm telling you, watch that Sangre Chicana versus MS1 match. And if you don't think that match is fucking awesome, I don't know what to tell you, bud.
If someone, I mean, maybe not in the traditional sense a good brawler, but since we're on the subject of lucha, but when it comes to the mask matches, El Hijo del Santo, I mean, he will just get covered from head to toe with his own blood, and he will do, he will work his offense towards being like a brawling, almost like a, and yeah, I mean, that's a guy who would get down and dirty. I mean, not dirty as in cheating, but I mean, he will, he's not afraid to juice up for those matches.
Well, if you're talking about modern guys too, you got to throw out Viano 3 because he did stuff. He's dude's in his mid 40s and just totally bleeding everywhere. I mean, just fucking everywhere. And the matches I'm talking about are just matches I've seen recommended of just the best lucha matches of the year. And Viano 3 is, obviously everybody knows Viano 4 and Viano 5 from WCW, but this dude's older than both of them and just totally kicking ass and bleeding all over the place. So you can watch a Viano 3, I think it's mask versus hair match, maybe, or mask versus mask match. I'm trying to think who the guy he fought was, but I watched the match and it was awesome.
There is a match from, I don't know if it was 2012. Oh, it's from like an independent promotion. I gotta find this. It's like outrageously good. I'll have to bring that up some other time because I don't remember. But there's this outrageously good match in some independent promotion in Mexico, and um, oh man, it's no point even going on. I can't remember
Well,
who was in it.
if we're going to talk about good brawling, we'll talk about the match that me and you've talked about before, Pedro, and private messaging is LA Park versus Macias. Their whole stuff in 2010, 2011. Those matches
Oh yeah, yeah.
are incredible. I mean, they're just great stuff. The blood just flows everywhere.
Have you seen the LA Park versus La Parka match from Triple Mania several years ago?
No, but I heard it's awesome.
That match is like is it's nuts. I mean, there's cool action and stuff, but it's also just this crazy just junk happening all over the place. It's like this epic chaos, and yeah, I mean that's one I think you might enjoy a lot,
I probably wouldn't. I
especially if you like the La Park Macias matches. Yeah, you should. Yeah, I think you'll dig that one.
for those who are listening, Laparca is the gentleman that we all know from WCW who did the chair guitar solo, and there was a guy that went under L.A. Park who was in the same kind of outfit and wrestled kind of a Laparca style, and obviously they have a match against here. The matches I'm talking about are L.A. Park versus Macias. It's not Laparca, it's L.A. Park versus Macias. And they're totally blood feuds and just totally awesome. But I haven't seen that La Parka versus L.A. Park match. I know
Oh, I have to correct you on something here. L.A. Park is the original La Parka, the one
oh,
from WCW and so forth. He is the original, and AAA owned the gimmick, so he had to like sort of change the look a little bit, and he had to change the name. and he came up with L.A. Park or La Park, whatever you want to call it. But yeah, he's the original La Parka, and so the guy who plays La Parka in AAA is like a nephew or a cousin, something like that. So they're both related by family. But yeah, they had this huge match over who was the real La Park or whatever.
Well, it
La
makes it
Parka
makes
even.
it makes sense because LA Park is awesome, and there's nothing better than a guy with a mask on just bleeding like shit.
Yeah.
Do you have any other guys you want to mention for brawling or punching?
Mm. Man, I can't think of anything. I keep blanking. I'm doing a terrible job at this. What about you? You have anyone else you want to mention?
I'm trying to think, but I'm kind of blanking myself.
It's getting late. That's what it is. We're like the day's catching up with us. Well, we'll just wrap things up here. I think maybe the next time we should do the vice versa of our first one and do the top 10 least favorite wrestlers to bookend the top 10 favorite wrestlers. What do you think about that?
Well, I think that'll be all right. But spoiler alert: I think everybody knows that I will have Bruiser Brody on my top 10 list.
Yeah, I think we all know that, and so yeah, maybe next time we'll do the top 10 least favorite wrestlers. Um, Flus was saying next up best dropkick. Maybe we'll add that on to the next one. But
Off the top of my head, I'll just throw it out there, and I'll have to think about it. But I'll say best drop kicks of all time. I'll say Jim Brunzell, jumping Jim Brunzell, the Killer Breeze, Jim Brunzell. Um, I'll say Tom Zink, the Z-Man, and I really like Owen Hart's drop kick a lot.
those are all good. I also think Kurt Hennings was really good, and he doesn't do this anymore. But early on, who had a really good drop kick was Randy Orton. Believe it or not, he could get like super high air on his drop kick.
Yeah, yeah, I know what you're talking about now. And we've got to talk about, just throw back to the show that no one's ever heard, the first show. We got to give it to Ricky Morton and Robert Gibson. You got to have that double drop kick, the double team drop kick, as you will. But right in the mush, that was good stuff.
Yeah, they have a really good double drop kick. Um, so yeah, so okay, well we're gonna wrap this up. Thanks for doing this, Josh. We will do top 10 least favorites or something or whatever we come up with next time, and hopefully I'll enable the Q&A correctly next time, and we can have people argue with us or whatever. And yeah, thanks for listening, everyone out there. Any last words for the tonight, Josh? That sounds like an execution. You know what I mean?
I will say that I just want everyone to picture, after we talked about the Rock and Roll Express double drop kick, just picture Ricky and Robert tag teaming an old school 80s ring rat, and Robert keeping his eye out on the door for the old man to bust through the door.
Oh my goodness. There you go. So thanks for listening, and adios.